The Loop. Now, it's a crazy cover. The art is a little different. The coloration scheme is a little bit different. But the reason I'm talking about it, I believe this is one of the best games that I have played in 2020. And let me tell you why. So, this is The Loop, as I mentioned. As I just smacked myself in the face with the board. This is The Loop by Ketchup Games. This is a publisher out of Europe. And this was a game that was not very widely published. It was mostly published in French. There were only about, I think they said at the distributor level, 100 copies in English. So when this was announced, even with the vague concept and mechanisms that were described, I was instantly piqued. So The Loop, all I knew about it originally was that it is a cooperative time travel-esque mechanism type game. And full disclaimer at the beginning of this video, I am a sucker for hard co-ops. And I don't really have anything that fits the nature of that description. And what it sort of reminded me of in the description, and this is going to be very abstract, so bear with me, is the comparison to Anachrony for worker placements with the looping and the time travel element. It's not the same at all, but that's the closest I can come to a comparison in the uniqueness of what it allows you to do. It piqued my interest enough that I did some Google foo and found out that Philibert was going to be selling it, and Ketchup Games announced that, and BlackRock Games I think was the distributor, and they said that they were going to be having some copies. So I did something I don't normally do, is I signed up for one of those notify me in stocks, and I ended up, long story short, obviously getting an English copy. I paid almost as much in shipping as the cost of the game because it came from France. So right then and there, I'll be honest with you, I was frankly a little bit worried that this game was going to just completely fall apart in terms of what I was expecting and what I was hoping for versus what it actually played as. So the concept is that you are time travelers fighting the evil Dr. Fu. And believe me, as his name being Dr. Fu, it sets up all sorts of puns that the rulebook makes use of. But why this game is so unique is that you are simultaneously deck building, putting out fires a la Pandemic, but also trying to actively create turns that are more than the sum of their individual parts. And you do this via the mechanism of where the game gets its actual name, called looping, where you are using energy that is placed on the board by characters to allow yourself to basically refresh the cards or some of the cards that you have played that turn to be able to use them again. And it is a lot of board manipulation. You manipulate the board by moving the bad guys around. You manipulate the board by adding the energy that helps you loop. You manipulate the board by removing the cubes that represent the destruction that Fu is doing in the various time eras. And so there are 7 eras around the board, all of a different color. And so each era will also have a hidden objective that you need to sabotage to prevent Fu from achieving world and time domination. The difference, again, that this game sort of puts a twist on is that only 2 of these objectives are revealed at any one point in the game. So you can only work on 2 of them. And so oftentimes, if you find yourself at a crossroads, it's because you've split which objectives you're working on. And we found that out the hard way the first couple games we played. Full disclaimer, this is one of the hardest co-op games I have ever played. I've played Last Bastion. I've played games similar to that. This game is equally as hard, and I have only played on one of the 4 different modes that this game has, and that is the regular mode. The bread and butter, if you will. Hey, it's Chris. Let's talk The Loop a second. Let's talk how easy this game actually is to play. And I've got the board set up so we can start and you can visualize it instead of me just blabbing about the rules, because otherwise that's what I normally do. So let's take a look. So as I said, this is the basic board setup. You can kind of see already sort of how it's set up into the 7 different eras. You have eras going around that are consecutive around the time periods that they're meant to be. So you can see that this one starts off sort of your ancient Mesopotamian sort of thing to medieval, to the Mona Lisa, to more of a more advanced Renaissance, to sort of a modern day, sort of a postmodern robot world, and then sort of the post-apocalyptic. And you've got Fu's little time machine in the middle, going around to the different eras, pointing at the different eras, dropping the distribution of cubes to different eras. And so what happens on a turn, this is really, really straightforward. What you're gonna do is you have all the bad guys set up in this random bag. You pull a couple bad guys out. The backside, this is really clever, the backside tells you where to lay them, on the yellow, on the purple, and then the front side tells you where they have to go to be destroyed off the map. So yellow has to be moved around, manipulated to purple, and then it's destroyed. Now why is that important? So those cubes that I just dropped down in the center, each round you're going to be dropping more and more cubes. So the first round you're going to be dropping 2 cubes plus the number of guys that are out. And so the more guys come out, the more cubes you have to drop. So in this one right here, for example, you only have 1 guy. So if Fu is in that era, it's 2 plus the number of guys, which is 3. Simple, straightforward. You'd be putting 4 over here. So in round 2, you're putting more of these guys out every turn, which means that you potentially are putting more of these into here. And so why is that important? Is because if you'll notice on the outside track here, there are 3 spots for these red cubes. And if one of these spots has to be put a red cube in, and you cannot, then it overflows and a vortex is created. Now, why is a vortex important? A vortex destroys the mission that you have here. And if you can't do enough missions, you lose. If you have to put a vortex down, it destroys the mission that could be impartially done. So if you had this one, you needed to do 6 times, putting the energy on the era, it destroys it, it puts a vortex out there. And there are only 3 vortexes. If you ever put a 4th vortex down, you lose. If you ever have to put a vortex on a vortex, potentially, you lose. So on your turn, after you do that, you're going to be laying a card out each time as well, based on the era that it goes to. So this is a purple card, so you'd place it over here to be available if you end your turn there. You can just take it. And this is the interesting aspect, is this card doesn't go to your discard pile like a lot of other deck building games do. It goes to the top of your deck. And on your turn, you're going to be taking the top 3 cards from your deck, looking at them, and using them in combination with your special power that you can use once a turn. You also get a free move once per turn. So you're looking at these cards and you're using them to manipulate the board. Remove the red cubes, push around the bad guys, but then also to do things like add green cubes. Now green cubes is where the game really gets its name from. It allows you to loop. And looping allows you to take cards that are in your hand that have the same symbol that you have played, and it basically allows you to untap them and use them again. And that is where the combos come in, that is where the excitement comes in, because you can loop as many times as you have energy on the board in those areas. You can also see that it just looks beautiful. These fit nicely. There's no banging, there's no trying to slot them in. This is just super nice and super easy to put together. You can leave it together in the box. Nice wooden meeples. It's great. What I really like though is that if you look at the actual eras themselves, so for example, let's look at the yellow era again. This is a yellow era. It is medieval. And so what do you have in the medieval? You have the Holy Grail and you have Excalibur. So the theme matches what the cards are in that era as well. There was a red one over here, which is sort of your nuclear war. And what was the card for that era? It was a virus sample. So what do I think of this game? Especially with this little random cube tinkerer distributor? I think this game is freaking fantastic. This is, I hate using this term, but this is something that other people would probably call the pandemic killer. It doesn't kill it for me by any means, but this is a unique alternative that combos, that thematically fits with what they're trying to go for. That is out of this time. Now, I'm going to get the biggest criticism out of the way of this game, is that some of the terminology, and I'm not sure if this is a translation issue because it's coming from a different language, although I will say at the same time, the translation in this game is very good. Very good in terms of the English. I had no problem understanding it. But what I will say is that some of the terminology they could have just made simpler. Make available, draw, just little things like that we had to look up a couple times because, well, does make available actually mean draw it? Does it mean play it? Does it mean we can use the power? So there's just little things like that make it, not quite perfect, because there's no perfect board game. But this is one of those games that I will say that all of us sitting down, my wife and my other couple guys I've played it with, and girls, we all looked at each other afterwards, and this was the uniqueness of this game, was it made us want to play it right again, right away, whether we won or we lost. And not many games do that for me. You finish the game, you relax, you sit back, and you go, that was nice. Let's play something else. That was nice. Let's finish game night. I'll see you next time. This was, oh, we finished. Oh, geez. Oh, man, I really want to. We could have done that, and we should have done, and then we could do this next time and we could have done. And that's the emotion and the magnitude of the achievement that this game has done for me. Like I said, we've played it, I think, a half dozen times now, and we've won once. And it was the last time that we played because we finally figured out, after a half a dozen games, how we could do well enough. Now, I guess the other biggest criticism that this game is going to get, and I think Space Biff, who has a text review of this, who writes more eloquently than I can ever speak or hope to speak, highlights the fact that if you do not like randomization, if you do not like chance, this game is going to frustrate you beyond belief. Because the central mechanism of this game is that you are taking cubes each turn that represent thru and his machinations, and you are dropping them in the little tower in the center. And the tower has 3 little prongs that can put the cubes in one of 3 different areas each round. So you may have 2 of those 3 areas completely well covered, and all of your cubes go into the area that is already full, which can cause you to vortex or even lose the game. And you may have little way to fully mitigate that, and so some games are going to end just like that. But then the game plays so quickly once you know what you're doing, you can play this game in under an hour. So 45 minutes with 4 people, with a game this interactive and manipulative, is also a relative rarity when it comes to this. We play Pandemic Iberia, and it's not less than an hour. It's more an hour and 15 minutes, sometimes even up to an hour and a half, depending on how slow we are that night. And this game does not suffer from that, because even though the turn play is one after another, once you get in the groove of how the turns actually play and what the cards can do in front of you, it is very smooth. And it is easy to get into a groove. The game itself comes with 5 different characters, so you can change characters between the games. They are all asymmetric. They all have powers, They all have different strengths in the cards or the decks that you start out with. And so they can focus on certain things. And the other thing that I think we didn't even notice until this probably the third game is that the cards that get laid out as cards you can get to go into your deck, they have fully encapsulated the theme. So a card that is going into the post-apocalyptic region that you can get from there, it's not just some random card. It's a virus mutation that affects, machines. And so it's the medieval era has things like Excalibur and the Holy Grail. So they're tied in and they've got some element of that, and the illustrations are just beautiful. This is not a serious game. If you can't tell by the cover, this is not meant to be a serious game. You are foo fighting. Yeah, I went there. So does the game book. Anyway, it fully embraces what it is and what it's meant to be, and it does it in such a different way than I have seen in these cooperative games before, that I look back, and the reason I mentioned it at the beginning was I have absolutely no qualms about having paid as much in shipping as I did for practically the game itself to get this. Because this, without a doubt, is going to be one of the best games of 2020. I dare say this is going to be, or is one of my favorite cooperative games of all of them. And so this doesn't come along very often for me. And that's why I'm so hyped about this game. So why is this game so good? This is a cooperative game done in a style, in a way that I haven't seen out there. It's innovative, it's creative, it's engaging, and it's fun. And that last one is really the biggest take home. It's taking elements from other games and mashing them into a cooperative game that have not really been done before. And it does it in an ingenious way. Deck building, twist. Bag drawing, twist. Board manipulation, area control, twist. Taking multiple turns in a row and being able to use cards multiple times a turn, twist. Combination of those things, it clicks. All of them click nicely. They work in synchrony like an orchestral ode to joy. This is a game, if you like cooperative games, that I don't say this that often. You should go out of your way to try and find a copy if you see one available in English. There's too much text for the French version to work for you. I'll say that right up front. So don't try. There's plenty of symbology, but there's too much text on the cards that you won't be able to do it. I have not had many games that I wanted to play 2 or even 3 times in a row in my collection. I have a lot of games that I like, but for obvious various reasons, when you pull out a game, sometimes you finish it and you just can't play it again. Not because it's bad, not because it did anything wrong, but you're just, okay. This has not had that effect after half a dozen games. I always play it, and I always want to play a second game afterwards. Why aren't you going to like this, though? For just the things I've mentioned. If you don't like the idea of these cubes randomly falling out of this into one of 3 areas that you have no control over, and sometimes you're just going to get screwed by, you're not going to like this game. If you need to have perfect control in that sense, you're not going to like it. Because there is some randomness from that element of things. But I think a lot of us who like this type of game in the first place enjoy taking that randomness that is handed to us and then thus trying to find the best solution to it each time that it is given to us in a different way. Because then, without even having, the 87 different types of cards and 16 different heroes, the replayability and the difference between one game to the next is still massive. So should you get it? I don't know. It's going to be expensive if you can find an English copy. But I am more than happy that I paid what I did to get it in my collection, because it's going to be a keeper for a very, very long time. I have just scratched the surface of what this game can do, and I'm excited to try out the other modes beyond just the basic one. And if I never even make it past the basic mode, it reminds me very much of Spirit Island in that way. Spirit Island has all these other modes. You can fight, you know, the other nations, but you can just fight the island and just do the regular with just the spirits and be just as happy with it. And that's what this reminds me in this sense. If I played just the base game, you know, and we just played it a bunch of times, it'd be different every time. It'd be an adventure every time. It'd be chaos every time. And I would be completely satisfied with the purchase. And I already am. So anything on top of this is just icing on the cake. So there you go. That is The Loop by Ketchup Games. If you can, check it out. Highly, highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Lead your games. See you around.